What's going on, YouTube? Today we're starting the Warpet refresh with the Sand Lizard. Okay, so for our first Warpet refresh series, I thought we'd go with the Sand Lizard. And the reason I thought the Sand Lizard would be an interesting idea is that, the Sand Lizard just seen a huge surge in popularity lately. And the reason for that is, I think, pretty obvious. It's because infantry is so strong right now in Call of Dragons. Particularly the later generation infantry. Basically, it takes a long time to bring them down, even if you're focus firing them with a lot of ranged units. And all that time, you're taking massive counterattack damage. Even if you're not getting targeted by the infantry or something else, you're really going to get low into yellow, before pretty long. And so it helps to have something to offset all that counterattack damage, to keep your troops in the fight for a good while longer. And the Sand Lizard is a very popular, very honestly pretty easy, cheap way to do that. I think the Sand Lizard is a very viable option basically for any ranged unit. Now, we should start by saying that the Sand Lizard technically works with any unit, but I do not think it is good with infantry, and I do not think it is good with melee cavalry. But it is good with archers, it is good with mages. I think it's even good with elf cav, but I would not use it with any melee unit. The other thing about the Sand Lizard is if you're going to go with it, I think you really need a pack of Sand Lizards to heal each other, to keep all your units up at the same time. I think one Sand Lizard really isn't that effective all the time. Now, it's not terrible, it is cheap, but I think if you're going to go the Sand Lizard route, you want to go all in. You want to run 4 or 5 Sand Lizards with your archers, with your mages, something like that. Okay, so I think we all understand basically how the Sand Lizard works, but there are a couple things that I think are worth pointing out here. The first is that its talent skill is not dependent on the rage cycle. It goes off every 6 seconds. We'll talk about the Amber skill later on. Regardless of your rage cycle period, presuming you're in combat. This is really strong because it allows you to sort of, poke in and out of combat, stay just at range, back off, come back a couple seconds later, come back in. And provided that you do, provided that there are 6 seconds between those, pokes, if you will, your Sand Lizard is going to go off every time. You don't have to, get the full rage cycle off. Like a lot of mages in particular are really dependent on the rage cycle for, damage. Okay, the second thing worth pointing out right at the start here is the Sand Lizard is restricted to your legions. It will heal the legion it's assigned to. It will heal any legions that you have. But if you have nearby allied legions from other players in your alliance, on your team, whatever, Sand Lizard does them no good, right? It only heals your legions. That is a weakness, but it is what it is. Okay, so with those things in mind, let's talk through the unique skills real quick. We'll start with the Amber skill, Advanced Stone Aura. This reduces the cooldown of Stone Aura by 1 second for every 135 agility you have. So the key breakpoint here is 270 agility. That's achievable, but honestly pretty tough to achieve on the Sand Lizard. If you get 270 agility, I do think Advanced Stone Aura is very good. It's a 1/3 reduction at 270 agility. If you don't have 270 agility, I think you skip Advanced Stone Aura. The Pet Shop skill, Intense Stone Aura. This is a bait, right? This increases the healing that Stone Aura does, but restricts it to the legion that the pet is assigned to, right? So you don't do the splash healing anymore. This is terrible. You want to run Sand Lizards in packs, so that all of them heal each other. And if you take Intense Stone Aura, not only does it take up a pet, a skill slot on your pet, not only does it cost a lot of coins, but it decreases the overall healing your Sand Lizard does, albeit increases it to that 1 legion. I think this is terrible. Never take this. Okay, so with that in mind, we have the talent skill, obviously. We might have the Amber skill. What do you want? I think you want the healing package pretty much all the time. Now, 2 of the healing package, Tranquility, which is a spirit skill, and Divine Blessing, which is a strength skill, increases the strength of the heal, so obviously that's very good. The third part of the healing package is Great Care. This is an intelligence skill. It basically gives you a secondary heal on the pet. a 10% chance to heal every second, max once every 8 seconds. It's not a huge heal, but you are getting the benefit from both Divine Blessing and Tranquility, so you might as well double dip on the healing synergy there. And you also tend to run this pet on a lot of heroes that benefit from healing synergy, for example, Moo. So I do think Divine Care, or excuse me, Great Care is a good option on the Sand Lizard. Okay, so that's 3 skills. The talent skills 4. So what are the last pet skills, assuming you're lucky enough to have a pet with enough skill slots? Okay, it's going to vary a bit. Obviously, you can use this pet on any legion, but I only recommended using it on ranged legions. But still, it varies a lot depending on whether it's a mage pet or an archer pet or even an elf cav pet. But basically, what you're going to want to do is, based on the number of skill slots you have and whatever attributes you have good on that pet, you should take some skills that generally help the pet. And we'll talk through a few of these here. For example, on this pet, obviously intelligence is very strong, and then agility is pretty good. Not quite 270, sadly, but everything else, but still pretty good. And all the other major skills, strength and spirit, are really low. And you'll find that endurance and luck on sand lizards are always sort of like capped at a very low level. So what did I do? Well, I want an intelligence skill. Unfortunately, the talent skill is intelligence, and then great care is intelligence. So I only have one more intelligence skill left on the pet. I went with Sudden Epiphany because this is a mage pet. And then I put a couple of the agility skills on it, basically because that was my other strong skill. And for a mage, agility, poison gland, and outbursts of rage are sort of what you want on the mage sand lizard. All right, so let's talk through the skills depending on what you want right now. Okay, and we'll start with mage pets here. So we'll check magic and mixed. And what do you want? Well, we'll start with intelligence. And like I said, you already probably have 2 intelligence skills on there with the talent skill and great care. I think the third skill you definitely want is Sudden Epiphany. It just increases the magic attack of your legion. Not amazing, but like cheap. Even at a 2-star level, it's just 915 coins. The other option is Magic Pulse, which increases the crit damage for your hero skills. It's okay. If you had another intelligence slot on here, I think this would be good. But because you don't have the other intelligence slot, I think Sudden Epiphany is better. Dauntless, you don't have a shield effect, so this is useless. You don't want the pet skill enhancers because you don't do any pet skill damage, right? Elemental and Harmony, things like that are just worthless. And then a question I get a lot on the Sand Lizard, does follow-up work? Sadly, follow-up does not work on the Sand Lizard. So there's no use to taking it on the Sand Lizard. So for intelligence, Sudden Epiphany is the pick. Okay, the other skills, strength. You definitely want Divine Blessing, and then if you have excellent strength, you can choose Shield Breaker as your other strength skill, but Divine Blessing is where you want to go first. Then for Spirit, I think your main choice here, obviously past Tranquility, is Robust Body. Gives you just additional hit points. It's okay, it makes you a little tankier. Pure Strength has a chance to remove a debuff from your legion. I don't tend to think that's very good. Okay, and then finally our other sort of major skill slot is Agility. You saw I had Outburst of Rage and Poison Gland on there. Those are the main choices. You might choose Wild Agility if you want to sync the movement speed on your mages or what have you. Now, if you're running a Sand Lizard Ball, I do think it is a very good idea to sync your movement speed so they're all next to each other all the time and they get all that splash healing. Okay. Okay, so that was the magic choices. What about if you have it with an archer pet? Well, we'll start with agility. Poison Gland is fine pick, and then obviously wild agility, it's going to depend on, if you want to sync movement speeds or something like that. Outburst of Rage tends to be less good in archers because they tend to be less skill damage focused, so I don't think that's as good of a pick on archers. On the other hand, Timely Strike is very good because it increases the crit rate of your normal attack. Not a ton, but you are very normal attack focused with archers, so I do advise you to go there. Pursuit Predation, this is hero skill, so I think you skip it on the archer pick. And Blood for Blood is counterattack. Season 1, we'd run like the Haskanara archers, but you wouldn't run that with a Sand Lizard anyway. You'd want a Poison Lizard on that. So I think you skip Blood for Blood. However, Chain Strike does work on your Sand Lizards, right? Because it makes your Legion make an additional normal attack. I think they call it a follow-up normal attack now. That's very good. It triggers a lot of synergy on your Archer Marches. You do want Chain Strike even on your Sand Lizard. Okay, what about strength skills once we've passed Divine Blessing, which is very good? Manic Might and Shield Breaker are okay. Nothing amazing. Tooth and Claw, Fatal Bite, useless on a Sand Lizard. Don't get those. For your archers, hit weakness is pretty good because it has you do a little additional crit damage. However, keep in mind you are going to need some crit enabler. Beast Mark, skill damage, you don't want that. Swift Revenge, counterattack, you don't want that. So for the archers, obviously you want Divine Blessing. Shield Breaker, Manic Might are good, and then hit weakness can be good. Moving on to Spirit, really your only choice is Robust Body. Like I said, Pure Strength, I'm not a big fan of that. So Robust Body, let's go with that if you have a high Spirit and are just looking to fill out the pet. And then finally, we have Intelligence. Not a lot of great choices for the Sand Lizard beyond Great Care, so I think that's where you stay there. Okay, finally, we'll move on to the Elf Cavalry. Remember, your Elf Cavalry, they want to do skill damage. They have their Wild Barrage effect, which gives them a good bit of rage to begin with. But Elf Cav are more dependent on rage generation than melee Cav. So Outburst of Rage can be a good choice for your Elf Cav. Poison Gland is fine. And then Wild Agility, obviously it depends on whether you want the movement speed there. You don't want Blood for Blood. You're not looking for counterattack in your Elf Cav. However, Pursuit Predation can be good. They're Cav, they care about skill damage, so Pursuit Predation could be a good choice. Okay, moving on to Strength, what do we want there? Manic Might, Shield Breaker, those are fine, not amazing. Beast Mark can be good. It is crit damage, so you need a crit enabler, but you can get that from the skills tree. You can also get that from, the other skills we talked about earlier. So Beast Mark can be okay. You do not want Swift Revenge. You do not want hit weakness for your Elf Cav. Okay, moving on to Intelligence here. Again, the only thing we really care about is Great Care, so that's the only Intelligence attribute we want for Elf Cav Sand Lizard. And finally, moving on to Spirit. Once again, Robust Body is fine. I don't like Pure Strength, and otherwise you skip the Spirit skills. Okay, now that's if you want specific Sand Lizards for specific marches. You can see, for example, this one here, it has Sudden Epiphany. Obviously, it's only going to work for Magic Marches. But the other alternative is to build it out so that your Sand Lizards can move from Mages to Archers to Cav, in which case you want to take all those generic skills here, right? So Poison Gland and Outburst of Rage, they work for everyone. Outburst of Rage isn't amazing for Archers, but it works for Archers, that's fine. Poison Gland's good for everyone. And so if you have Sand Lizards that you're going to want to shift from one march to the next, from Mages to Archers to Elf Cav, you might want to consider choosing skills that benefit all those types of marches. Now, the last thing to keep in mind with that is, remember, the Sand Lizard itself will have stamina, so if you keep shifting heroes with marches, your Sand Lizards might run out of stamina, before your heroes do. So just beware of that. Okay, and that's our first Warpet refresh, the Sand Lizard. Not only is it still viable all these seasons later, I actually think it's gaining strength as the game goes along, as sort of a soft counter or soft answer to all that infantry you're fighting. It works with any march, but I do think you want to use it with ranged units predominantly. And I think you want to run it in packs. You don't want to run one Sand Lizard, you want to run 4 or 5 Sand Lizards, so all of your marches get the benefit from that splash healing. Anyway, that's all I got for you today, and until next time, you stay classy, Belleron.